just want to take a quick moment to talk to you about our Lord and Saviour, Terminal Ballistics. I've mentioned it a few times in other videos, but I feel like I've not really given you a full-on correct explanation. I always talk about the amount of joules a bullet has when it strikes the target, being the animal. When I think about the joules of energy hitting a target, to me that's almost like a transitional point between external ballistics and terminal ballistics. External ballistics obviously being the trajectory and how it flies and all that sort of piss from the muzzle all the way through to the target. That's external ballistics. But once it strikes the target, it's actually terminal ballistics, which is a whole different thing again. So I want to talk today about bullets, terminal ballistics, and fucking killing shit. So this should be pretty good. So the joules of energy, what that's actually giving you is the actual impact, how hard that bullet is striking that target. And that can play a role in how the bullet will function, but also plays a role in actual just power hitting the target. So for instance, if we were to shoot at a deer with a full metal jacket round, obviously that round is not going to expand because full metal jackets are not designed to expand. It's going to pass pretty much straight through it unless it hits some bone. The only power going through that is whatever that tiny, the caliber width of that bullet can hit, vital organs and whatnot, and the actual energy imparted onto the animal, that's what will give you the kill. So that's why hunting bullets are generally some sort of bullet that's going to expand, because what you want is, instead of it being a .308 caliber bullet striking a deer, once it hits, it's going to open up and it might end up being, let's just arbitrarily say, .45 caliber. So you're getting a smaller caliber to hit with, to give you the speed, because it's obviously easier to push a smaller bullet faster. And then once it hits, it opens up and creates a bigger wound tract. So that's the idea behind hunting bullets. So the energy, when I do talk about that, and I have talked about that in previous videos, is the amount of energy being produced by the bullet as it strikes the target. Once it's in the animal, yes, it's going to impart energy, but it's also the bullet is going to function. Now we need to talk about what the bullet is actually doing. As I alluded to before, most hunting rounds are designed to open up, mushroom out, creating a bigger wound tract, meaning that, by expanding, you have a more likelihood of that then hitting an artery because you have a bigger surface area. Also, same with like hitting a lung. The bigger hole you can put in a lung, the quicker the animal is going to bleed out, because obviously the lungs have a lot of blood going through them, because that's how you oxygenate, and then, you don't bloody die and whatnot. Let's first talk about the difference between match ammunition and hunting ammunition. You've probably heard this thrown around a lot, and I dare say if you're watching this video, you probably don't really understand it, because if you did understand it, you wouldn't be watching this, because then you would just be watching it confirm that you know what you know, or to shit on me, either way. So I'm just going to assume that you don't know, so I'll explain. Match ammunition it's designed mainly for ballistic performance, being external ballistic performance, not terminal ballistic performance. They can have similar effects to hunting ammunition. For instance, like the ELD-M versus the ELD-X from Hornady. Very, very, very similar bullets. However, there are some slight differences. Generally, in match ammunition, they have a thinner jacket, and 9 times out of 10, match ammunition is going to be cup and core. So you might be going, what the fuck is cup and core? So cup and core is when they make the bullet, the copper jacket itself is pressed into, or it's a billet pressed into a cup. That cup is then elongated to be the shape of the bullet. It's filled then with lead and then closed off. That's cup and core. Being made the way that it is means that when it hits something, generally we have de-jacketing of the round, generally is what's going to happen, or jacket deformation. Two different things, but slightly, can have similar properties to them. De-jacketing is where when it functions and opens like this, the jacket is going to completely come off the core, being the lead. Generally the lead is going to turn into fine dust. That dust is going to be distributed across a large area. It's not really going to help in us penetrating or doing any effect to that animal. Here's the jacket that was sitting on top of the meat, and that's all it's done. Hasn't even gone through the skin. Just made him a bit doity. Bit of lead. Fuck, I did not expect that. Not at all. Match ammunition also generally has a thinner jacket than hunting ammunition, so it generally deforms a lot easier. Jacket deformation could be it deforming to some degree. It's a bit of a weird term, jacket deformation. Alright, so you're probably wondering what the bloody hell I'm blabbing on about. So I'm going to show you some examples. We're going to talk about, this exact example is going to be Nosler Bella 168 grain match ammunition. I have a match bullet, it's Nosler Bella 168 grain, that we pulled out at the back of the range in the catch. You can see on the tip we have a bit of jacket deformation. So because it is a hollow point, you can see that that jacket starts to rip open. We've got a fair bit of jacket deformation on the front, but you can see that by and large this bullet is whole. It has obviously bent the bullet as well, so I'm pretty sure this struck a rock in the catch, but that's a good example at the front there of a bit of jacket deformation. So if that hit an animal, yes, it would do a little bit, but not as much as a similarly sized round designed to be expanding. Now the reason I'm talking about Nosler Bella 168 grains is because a mate of mine hunts with those and he's taken a couple of deer with them, so we have some sort of, information to be able to gain from that. Alright, so he took a deer in our local state forest. The shot was from 65 metres. It hit up on the very top of one of the ribs, and it also it deflected off that rib or went through that rib and then went upwards, and it smacked it straight in the spine. Dropped it on the spot. I think it walked maybe 1 metre and then dropped. Now, I actually pulled the bullet out of that deer, and I have it in my hand right here, and I'll put it on the screen for you next to the full-size one we pulled out of the catch. And as you can see, there is fuck all left of that bullet. So essentially, when it struck that bone, it is completely disintegrated. Now, the fact that it hit it in the spine is the reason why it died. So yes, you can take game with match ammunition, but it also depends on exactly where you hit it. Had he have gone in the lung, in between all the ribs and gone double lung, that deer probably would have ran a fair way before tumbling over, but it probably would have died. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that you can't use match ammunition for hunting, because you bloody oath you can. There are certain circumstances when you definitely don't want to use match ammunition. Actually, he headshot a deer with that same ammunition, dropped that one as well, because, if you hit something in the fucking head, generally it dies. But he has had one where he shot a deer. It was about the same distance, about 50 metres or so. That deer, we tracked it for 1,400 metres. Tracked the blood trail for and then didn't find it. It really does depend on where you hit that. Now, had he hit that in a different spot, it probably would have dropped. Had he have hit that with a different bullet, potentially it could have dropped. That deer is lost, and was it the ammunition's fault? Was it the shot placement? Who knows? But it's interesting to note that he has dropped 2 deer with the Nosler Bella, and not dropped 1 as well. So I know a bloke who shot 2 rounds into a stag at about 6 metres, and they both didn't go all the way through the deer. Now, this was also cup and core ammunition. He doesn't know exactly what bullets they were, because they were loaded by a mate or given to him by a mate. The box is for GMX 165 grains. These 100% are not GMX, because GMX is monolithic, which we'll get into monolithics a little bit later. But as you can see, it's completely dejacketed. That's an interesting point there, and we'll circle back to that as well. But I do have another cup and core bullet, which is very similar to that, which is completely dejacketed there. So these are both my rounds. These are both Aussie Outback 165, which shoot a Sierra Game King, which are a lead-tipped boat tail, or soft point boat tail. Now, these were both pulled out of the catch, so these weren't pulled out of animals, but you can definitely see how that jacket deformation works. So, very similar to the performance displayed by the bloke who put 2 rounds into a stag, and they both did bugger all. No wonder the stag didn't drop on the spot with bullet performance like that. It's pretty bad. He's obviously got rid of that ammunition, he's going to something else, but it just goes to show that different bullets do different things, and you kind of got to know what you're shooting so you know what the typical performance is going to be. From my understanding, I'm not going to say this is exactly 100% true and correct, because I'm probably wrong, but my understanding of cup and core bullets is they're designed not to be shot at close range, but for longer distance where the bullet is now traveling slower with less energy as it strikes the target, meaning that it has a controlled expansion, and you will see the really nice mushrooming where it's opened up but still pushing through the animal, and the heat generated by that kind of like melts the lead and it sort of sits and you get this really nice perfect mushroom. Whereas if you're firing at really close range with a fuckload of energy, it's a little bit too much for that bullet to handle and it's just going to completely dejack it. Certain types of bullets are not designed and will fail to function correctly if hit too fast. And conversely, you can have the other way around where you fire a bullet and it's designed for rapid expansion at high velocities and you're shooting at longer range, it's slowed down too much and it won't function correctly. So I do think there is different bullets for different jobs, different ranges, and whatever, that's my opinion. They're like dicks. It's fine to have one, just don't force it on someone else. We've kind of talked about a few different things. Let's quickly just touch on bonded, partition, and monolithic, and then we'll talk about some numbers that I've got in my little ballistics thing here. So we've talked about cup and core to death. We know what cup and core is. Bonded bullets, so I've got a box of Accubond bonded core bullets here. It's essentially the same makeup as a cup and core, however the lead and the copper jacket are metallurgically fused. When it hits and rips open, the lead is physically, like molecularly in a fucking very small, you know, it's stuck together with science and it's not going to fall apart and dejack it. It's going to stay together. Now even on this box, it shows you at different feet per second how that bullet is going to function. You can see there at 3,200 feet per second, that almost looks like it's about to disintegrate. And I would say that the best performance out of these two would be 2,900 feet per second and 2,300 feet per second. So it does show you that, and that's with a bonded bullet, so you can understand why a cup and core bullet is going to completely dejack it and fuck up. Then we have, so partitions are going to be a fairly similar thing, but halfway down it, you're going to have essentially a wall of copper. So you're going to have lead in the back, lead in the front. So lead in the front might disintegrate, it could do, but the back is still going to retain some weight, because if you retain weight, it will then continue to go forwards. So thereby you're getting deeper penetration. And then we have monolithic bullets. Now monolithic bullets are solid, generally solid copper. I have a monolithic bullet right here, and I'll give you a close-up of that. This one is a 150 grain Hog Hammer 3030. This was also pulled out of the catch, and you can see how it's slightly open up and functioned there. Good weight retention, but it's not as a mushroom, not as big of a mushroom as some of these other rounds, which is why some people don't like monolithic bullets, because of the fact that they don't open up that well, but they do retain weight, which means they do get you penetration, which is why when people talk about safari hunting, generally they have an expanding bullet as their first, and the rest of the rounds in the mag are monolithics, so they can punch through skulls if they need to on dangerous game. That's the idea behind that, so pros and cons both ways of that. Now let's talk about some nerdy numbers. Let's go back to this stag, right? The stag that shot at 6 meters. Now, we don't know exactly what those rounds were. They could have been ELDMs. They could have been ALDXs. They could have been SSTs, because they're all cup and core. We know that was, well, we're 99% sure it was horned because it's got a red tip on it. It definitely wasn't a GMX, I can tell you that much, because it wasn't a monolithic bullet. So let's just say, you know, it could have been ELDM, ELDX, SST, something like that. In my data table I have right here, do I have an SST? I do have an SST, 165 grain SST, 2840 feet per second, which is 865 meters per second, with a ballistics coefficient of 0.447 and a sectional density of 0.248. If you don't know what all that rambling was just then, that's just, you know, ballistics coefficient is how efficiently it flies through the air with wind drag or air drag and all that sort of good stuff. And then sectional density is calculated by how wide, or the caliber of the bullet, versus how long that bullet is, with all these other yada 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 stuff in there. Sectional density, the higher the sectional density, the more it's going to penetrate through the target. If you want to learn more about ballistics coefficient and all that sort of stuff, maybe I'll do a video on external ballistics, to help you understand that as well, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking about terminal ballistics in this video. So, at the muzzle, we're pushing out 4,000 joules of energy. I don't like using foot-pounds because I'm not American, so we're going to roll with joules. 4,000 joules of energy. That is a fucking shitload of energy to be hitting that animal with. We can kind of understand why that bullet had such a rapid expansion that it dejacketed. A sambar stag is one of the biggest game we have in Australia. Obviously you've got like camels and fucking buffalo and whatever. And it's up there. Those sort of cup and core bullets are generally, they're meant for slower speed. So let's say, you know, out to even 300 meters, all right, you're pushing at 23.99. So that's almost half of what it is at the muzzle. Obviously, as that energy drops, it allows that to hit and not just completely fucking disintegrate, and it allows it to function correctly. Whereas if that was a bonded bullet at 4,000 joules, it probably wouldn't dejacket like that, it would function correctly. So this is where we're talking about which bullets to pick for different applications. If you're hunting in nice and close like this bloke was with hounds, you probably want to have a bullet that's going to stay together at very high velocities. All right, so let's talk about the Cellar and Bella stuff. I don't have that in my list, but I do have PPU, which is pretty much the exact same thing. At the muzzle, 2,600 feet per second, so 795 meters per second. BC of 460. I don't have a sectional density for that one. However, at the muzzle, it's 3441 joules. Obviously, going a hell of a lot slower and less energy than the SST. But it's still disintegrating because it's a match bullet, not a hunting bullet, which is what I was trying to allude to earlier. So even at 100 meters, and because his shot was 65 meters from the LRF, let's just say it was 100 meters, even at that we're going 29.16. That's energy, not speed, and it's still completely almost disintegrating the round. So out at further ranges, it'll probably stick together a bit better, but then you run the risk of it not functioning at all, because it isn't designed to expand, because particularly these ones only have a little itty bitty hollow point at the front. It might not expand at all, act more like a full metal jacket, and then you're just putting a hole through an animal and it's going to run around and not bleed out quick, because that's what we want them to do. We want the animal to bleed out as quick as possible, giving it, one, a humane kill, and two, it's not going to go as fast. You don't have to go as far to fucking find it. Now, these are pretty high numbers. To put this into perspective, all right, so 30-30, which is what we talked about before. So we had this 30-30 monolithic. I haven't actually shot any animals with those ones yet, but I'm interested to see how they perform, but I have shot them with these ones. So I have two examples here. One completely dejacketed, this was out of the catch, and this one was pulled out of a goat. You can see that the bottom half of the bullet, of the cup and core bullet, remained intact. The top half completely dejacketed, and we still have some lead retained there. Now that was out of a very small goat, so you can see that. Now, the reason why I talk about 30-30, just to put this into perspective, I shot a sambar hind at 15 meters with a 30-30 out of a 16-inch barrel on the run in Rubicon. It ran a further 60 meters, toppled over. So that bullet went in one side, through a rib, just underneath the spine, came out the other side and smacked another rib. It continued on, so it was a complete pass-through. I ended up finding the polymer tip for that. This was a Winchester Deer Point 30-30, 150 grain. I found the polymer tip in a backstrap while I was eating it, but the rest of the bullet had punched clean through. We had holes on, or had a hole on each side of the deer. So to put that in perspective, so 150 grain, it was going 2390 feet per second, which is 728 meters per second. BC is 226, which is very, very low. It's almost half the ballistics coefficient of the other rounds. That kind of affects how much energy it retains at different distances, but at that range, BC doesn't mean shit, so disregard. So the muzzle energy for that is 2576. So when you compare that to the 4,000 joules of a Hornady 308 SST, it's 165 grain, or an Aussie Outback 165 grain soft point boat tail, they're both pushing 4,000 at the muzzle. Now this little 30-30 is only pushing 2,600 joules at the muzzle, and still managed to punch that through two sets of ribs out the other side of a running hind. you don't need stupidly high joules to punch through the animal. Let's wrap this up in a little bundle and tie a knot around it, because I've been rabbiting on for about half an hour. When we talk about energy, it's the transitional point between our external ballistics, how the bullet is flying, striking the target. Once it hits our target, that energy imparted onto the animal is now our terminal ballistics, and the energy amount is going to change how that bullet functions depending on how the bullet has been constructed, whether it's a cup and core, a bonded, partition, or monolithic bullet. If you have a thin jacketed match grade bullet, the bullet is going to deform rapidly, especially at close range, and then at further ranges it may not function at all, being that it may not mushroom because it's not designed to expand as much as a hunting round. So that's match ammunition, that's why you should steer clear of it. When it comes to hunting ammunition, if it is a cup and core bullet, you probably want to use that bullet for further away shots where the velocity and energy is not going to completely rapidly deform that round, de-jacketing and getting jacket deformation, etc, etc. If you're shooting closer, you probably want to stick to a bonded bullet, would be my recommendation. So either a bonded, partition, or a monolithic. The amount of energy that you're pushing, you don't always need to be going for the highest numbers, the highest muzzle velocity, and the highest numbers in joules and whatever. I hear a lot of people crapping on about like, oh, well, fucking, you can't hunt a deer with that bullet because it's only going blah, insert fucking feet per second here, and it's not hitting with enough authority to knock it down. I hope you got something out of that. If you want me to talk about external ballistics, or I might even go fully in depth and go internal, intermediate, external, who knows? Drop your fucking comments. You tell me what you want to see, because I don't bloody know. Sometimes I put a video up and it goes ape shit, and sometimes I put a video up and everyone's like, oh, sick one, bro. All 4 people watched that. Anyway, I'll catch you in the next video. Hooroo.